Today I'm going to share with you the best and most unique perspective on shoewear you've probably ever seen. Shoewear can absolutely make or break how you feel on a daily basis, and I'm going to get into depth as to why this is. And I've wanted to make this video for a very long time because it is absolutely essential for some people to understand these concepts. Now, of course it's individual, but I will be breaking down those individual differences as well. Now let's break down the first and most important concept here, in that not only does your foot work with your hip throughout movement, it works with your entire body. So your foot dictates and is a large influencer on how your body moves through the world, and not just your lower body, but all the way up to your neck. The foot is very often the reason why I see people work on hip mobility, range of motion all day long, every day, but it doesn't seem to stick, or it doesn't seem to make a difference. And the truth, the honest fact of the matter is that you can work on hip mobility all day long, but if your foot can't interact with the ground in the way that it needs to as it relates to that hip mobility, your hip mobility is effectively useless. Let's say that we're moving through the gait cycle and we are beginning to shift our body weight onto one side. Now, this is a position of what we would call mid-stance phase of gait. So as the pelvis moves over the femur moves into an internally rotated position like this. The other leg is off of the ground at this point. Now, ideally, this should feed down the chain where the hip is internally rotated, meaning that the shin or the tibia is more internally rotated, and the foot should be in more of a pronated position. That would mean that the foot arch is dropping lower to the ground, because this twisting inwards of the tibia bone allows for me to access pronation. Now, I can work on my hip internal rotation mobility all day long, but if my foot cannot pronate and or my tibia cannot internally rotate, then that hip internal rotation has nowhere to go into the ground, and it is not going to help you. This can apply to the gait cycle, this can apply to running, this also applies to lifting weights. Now, the foot has tons of sensory receptors on it that allow for it to work with the ground effectively and send information back up to the rest of your body to understand where you are in space and move through the world effectively. The issue is that a lot of people are wearing what I like to refer to as sensory deprivation chambers for their feet, which is a lot of popular shoe wear, or they're not giving their foot the adequate support that they need. If you're wearing a very cushiony shoe, then what can happen is your foot no longer has the reference of the ground that it needs. It's basically unstable because that cushion is not allowing it to sense what's happening with the ground. So you're not going to be able to effectively move through heel strike to mid stance to push off. Your foot is effectively lost in space, and that's what too much cushion can do for the wrong person. So when you take these people's shoes off and you have them do anything barefoot, they have no balance, no proprioception whatsoever, because they don't have a relationship with the ground with their foot. An example of this would be someone who has a high arched foot. Now, for some people, they can wear barefoot shoes and just be totally fine, but other people will not be able to get adequate amounts of pronation and internal rotation if they don't have something for their foot to pronate into. But the good news is we're going to use objective assessments to determine if a pair of shoes is right for us. No more guessing, no more thinking that it's right, no more needing to break your shoes in. It should be instantaneous, and we'll know very quickly. And let me be very clear that my goal is for people to be able to wear whatever shoes they want, whenever they want. I don't like to be restrictive, but again, some people have a limitation at their foot, which is locking up their entire lower body and upper body oftentimes too. So what we want to do is have them wear these shoes very consistently for the first 6 to 8 weeks. Pretty much do everything in them if you can. Obviously, there will be some exceptions if, for example, you're a female and you need to wear heels to something, but we want to wear them as often as we can. And then after that, we start to take them away about 25% each week. So you'll wear them a little bit less each week until you're doing whatever you want to do. The other thing I want to make very clear is that good shoes are not an excuse to stop working on the foot. Just because your shoes are doing something really good for you does not mean that your foot is automatically going to learn to do what it needs to do. So oftentimes people need to learn how to get their foot to pronate and to be able to then resupinate or do all the tibial internal external rotation that it needs without the reliance on that shoe. And if you want a comprehensive program that addresses all of the range of motion and strength needs for that, then check out my Lower Limb Foundations program. It is perfect to complement a good shoe. Now, a good shoe should first and foremost not collapse in when you push on the back edge, the heel of it, because if it does, that tells us that that shoe is not providing stability to your calcaneus so that it can be secured and felt on the ground, and then you can guide yourself through the rest of the gait cycle effectively. The second thing is that a good shoe is only going to bend in the toe box, because if you were to bend your foot, where is it going to bend? At your toes or your metatarsal heads. So we only want the shoe to bend there, and that will allow for proper propulsion. The third thing is that your heel height is going to be symmetrical. So the shoe shouldn't be pushing your foot into a lot of inversion or supination or eversion or pronation. It should be very level. The other thing is there should be limited lateral heel give. So if you push on the outside edge of the heel, that is not going to give very much or collapse in, because if it does, that feeds into the first point about the heel stability through the gait cycle and the first stages of it. Okay, now what I will do is I will usually recommend someone gets 3 pairs of shoes, usually through Amazon or somewhere where they know they can return very easily the shoes that they don't want. I recommend 3 pairs because usually we'll know what will generally work for someone, but sometimes people respond to other shoes a little bit better than others for a bunch of different reasons. So we usually go with 3, and then we're gonna return the 2 that aren't as optimal. And we'll know based off of what tests are going to be improved the most. My favorite resource on the internet for recommending shoe wear and giving people a list of shoes that are oftentimes ideal is the Postural Restoration Institute shoe list. I think it's a fantastic resource. They do a really great job every year with new models of shoes, breaking them down, analyzing them, determining what is an adequate shoe that will effectively guide the foot properly or set the foot up to go through the gait cycle effectively. The only unfortunate thing is that it's a little bit subjective as to what constitutes a high arch or a medium arch or a low arch, but I will show you different examples of what shoes I would pick for certain types of feet. Now, as of the most current updated list at the time of making this video in August of 2023, when we think of a high arched foot, and I'll show an example of that, the Brooks Ghost 15 and the New Balance 880 V13s are great pairs of shoes for that type of person, because it will allow for the person to be able to guide their foot through that pronation effectively. And for your average arch individuals, the Brooks Adrenaline 23s are just the best for most people. They're so good. They check off all of those good qualities of shoes we talked about earlier, and I oftentimes find that these are usually the most effective. An alternative for someone that has more of a wide foot would be probably the New Balance 860 V13s. And for your very flat arched people or those with no arches, usually the Brooks Adrenaline 23 again is gonna be a good option, or the Saucony, I can never pronounce the name of that brand. Their Guide 16s are a great option as well. Now, in more rare cases, a Hoka shoe can be very effective. And this is because it is very cushiony. And again, this needs to be for the right person. If you have a big limitation in your big toe extension, then this means that you don't have the ability to move from a pronated position back to an effective push-off position. Because if you look at what's happening in push-off, the big toe needs to extend, and that will properly allow us to shift from one side to the other. So if you don't have the ability to do that, you're really gonna struggle to do it on concrete and flat surfaces. So by using a more cushioned shoe, you give the big toe a little bit more room and ease of extension, and that will allow you to usually get the best results with that shoe. But again, we need to use our objective tests. The best test you can use on yourself would be hip internal and external rotation. Also, your straight leg raise. All 3 of these things should instantly improve to some extent if those shoes are right for you. Your hip flexion should also feel at least more smooth after you put these shoes on and you go for a little walk. And we are going to check the upper body too. So we're going to use shoulder internal and external rotation. Make sure that you're going nice and slow on these assessments. And on shoulder internal and external rotation, you're not letting your trunk move all over the place, and you're not letting your shoulder pop forward or your ribs flare. Now, in order to test yourself in a pair of shoes, put the shoes on and make sure that they're snug. You're not tying them too tight, but you make sure that they're nice and secure. They should feel good immediately. If they don't, chances are those shoes aren't gonna do much for you, but you don't need to walk very far. All you need to do is walk about 25 to 50 yards and then retest your range of motion. And again, the shoes that are the best for you will give you the most overall range of motion improvements. One thing that you may want to do is add the heel lock, as we call it, onto your shoes, which can provide more stability to your calcaneus. And I have a tutorial of how you can do it, and it goes as follows. Okay, so we're gonna get a shoe that has this additional lace hole right here. And we're gonna take the lace and we're going to loop it through right there, leaving a little bit of room at the end, just like this. And then we're gonna do it on the other side as well. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the opposite side one. So I've got the right one right here. I'm gonna loop it through the left, like so. And I'm gonna take the left one, and I'm gonna loop it through the right one. Okay, now we've got the heel lock set up, but the way we tie it and secure it on our foot is really important. So we're gonna show you that now. Now the way we tie it's really important. First, you're gonna notice that because you created that heel lock, some of these laces here are gonna be kind of loose. So start at the bottom and then just tighten them up a little bit. Get the slack out of those laces and then get to the point where it's just those topmost laces that are loose. There we go. Now the way that we tie it is going to be really important. So as we pull that final lace, we need to pull it down and back. So look at how Jacob's doing that. That's going to provide stability to that calcaneus because it's going to pull the calcaneus itself into more of a down and back position. And then he's just going to tie his shoes normally. I would recommend trying that on all 3 pairs of shoes that you try. Hopefully that was really helpful, and hopefully this has given you a good idea as to what you need to do to pick the right pair of shoes for you. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. But I think this is going to be a great complement to all of my programs, like my beginner body restoration program, lower limb foundations, even my anterior pelvic tilt and shoulder health ebooks.